I'm just curious how you got into like dietitian work in general.
Okay. So this goes back to, I think I was in like upper elementary. I vividly remember taking an Ipono class from Keʻalohi Naipo. You
Oh,
recognize, she's one of the dietitians, very amazing and working for a long time in Hawaiian nutrition. And that was like, so it was her and Uncle Herbert Ho from Molokai, and I did an Ipono class for all the ohana. I was at Kamakau at the time, and the whole ohana had to participate, and we learned about nutrition and cooking and how nutrients and foods affect our body. And I think that was like the first like, oh, this could be like a career thing moment for me. And kind of just like stuck with that until high school and just got really interested in food stuff. And I think that was kind of like the catalyst for studying nutrition and then becoming like in this specialty. I think that has kind of evolved over years, but that has definitely been like one of the memorable moments where I knew that food and nutrition could impact health and wellness. And so how does that and then learning about like all the different like chronic conditions and how we're so impacted, um, what are some ways that we can prevent that and like do our part as members of the Lahui? So teaching about food and nutrition and it became a, and here we are,
yeah.
10 years later. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing that you had that experience at such a young age and that it impacted you the way that it did. Like planted those seeds that stayed with you.
Yeah. I feel super lucky. I
Yeah.
think food has always been really important, for a lot of different reasons. And I never really noticed that you could make a career out of it, like teaching people about their foods. Like it's cool.
Yeah. After high school, did you go to, I'm assuming you went to college. Like, how else did your interest in nutrition and all that like develop?
Yeah. I ended up choosing Oregon State for college, which was like far from Hawaii, but I had some ohana that lived in Oregon and visited one time, and I was like, this place is beautiful. If I'm gonna get an out of state experience, like I'd want to go here. So ended up going there, which was great. I learned a lot, did my undergraduate over there, and then ended up coming home. Um, God, this was like in 2010, I think. And then I worked at Ho'oluaina in Kalihi
Okay.
and got to mentor some more under Ka'u and just meet all the amazing people doing food and food systems work up there. And so I think that just kind of furthered my interest in nutrition and just knowing the importance of where our food comes from, who's growing our foods, how to grow foods, like that stuff that we don't really talk about in nutrition. We always talk about here's like the therapy, and I can tell you like how to make these adjustments, but people don't have that knowledge of growing things and that connection, that relationship to food and land. And so I felt like that was really like a part that I struggled with.
Mm.
Becoming a provider was like how to intertwine the two, like part, your identity, right? But then also like the Western training that you receive. And for so long, it felt like it had to be one way or the other. I don't know if that was your experience, but like
Totally.
it's like a lot of pressure from both sides. But like, how do we make those both work for, for people that we're working with? So and that played a big role um in my career. And then I got into my internship. We have to do like an internship for dietetic license, which is a year long, and you work in different settings as a dietitian. So like in the hospital, in the nursing home, and then you can do like a community health rotation. Yeah, so we get like exposure to like these little pieces of like where dietitians can work. And I was like,
Mhm.
hey, this is not for me. Like I can't do hospitals and that kind of
Mhm.
thing, but maybe more community work. And so I think that kind of helped me like narrow down my focus to do more like one-on-one with individuals like this or like group education type classes, like teaching them about food or whatever, nutrients and things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I feel like that's such a um not conflict. Maybe I don't know if it was a conflict for you to be in a hospital setting, but like for Kanaka, I feel like it can often be hard to be in healing spaces that are reactive, like hospital settings, because
Hmm.
it feels so Western and so backwards, right? Like we're treating these illnesses like after the fact instead of doing things that are preventative, like teaching diet to begin with, right? Which is what you said,
Hmm.
education,
Yeah,
something that you were drawn more to. Like, let's teach people about it so they can be healthy and we can avoid being sick or being in a hospital, right? To begin
yeah,
with. Yeah.
for sure.
I resonate with that too. Just like in my own career as a mental health therapist, wanting to move away from therapy and do more education so we can prevent things and not be trying
Mm.
like doing like mental health surgery after the fact is so much harder than
Yeah,
to like educate people from the get-go.
that
Yeah.
makes so much sense. And also, like the hospital is like the weirdest place to be doing any type of education afterwards. You're like, he just had a heart attack. Let him get
Yeah.
better, you know?
Yeah,
They were,
like
the doctor's like, go talk to him. I was like, wait, what? Yeah, like so, like you said, just that conflict of like, that seems like a better time for him to be resting and healing versus like talking about his what not to eat. It's
yeah.
just, yeah, it's a strange experience for sure.
So as you are doing like these internships and having all this experience with dietary work and nutrition work, did you start to notice any kinds of issues or themes with any kind of body acceptance or like just how people were experiencing their bodies or living in their bodies or like body image type of stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Um, I think so many people seek out dietitians in order to change their bodies, right? So I think there's a big correlation to that. And as I was working, I worked in different parts of the community. So one was like a weight management program, other was like traditional kind of outpatient counseling. And there's a lot of weight stigma in healthcare, right? So doctors will refer to you based on things like BMI, um, so there's a lot of emphasis on that message that certain body sizes are not healthy or well, right? So it definitely plays into the perception of your body and whether or not you're like healthy and well, right? So there is such a correlation, I think. But I never really received training on like how to have that conversation with folks, about the deeper root. Like we were like, okay, let's treat the nutrition piece, you know. And of course there's progress, but folks never really come to terms or like accept themselves as who they are, right? We're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg, kind of working on the surface level stuff, to make things better in the moment.
Yeah. When I hear BMI, I like get a tinge of like, oh, you know, as
For
someone
sure.
who has been like over the recommended BMI like my whole life since probably birth, which I
Same.
feel a lot of Kanaka would be, like I can't be the only one, probably not.
No.
Polynesians in general, I feel like would be probably over that. So yeah.
Yeah. It
Okay.
was never made with us in mind. So, we're all going to be, it's such a terrible measurement for our health. Like, I think to base somebody's health status off of this ratio of height and weight. Well, we know like health is so complex and dynamic. It's wild to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so I guess when people are expecting or hoping for a certain outcome to look a certain way or to like see a certain number on the scale or like fit a certain size, you know, genes or whatever it is. What is your approach in helping them to also see those different measurements of health in addition to like the, those more superficial like measurements?
Yeah.
I want to say superficial, but like, you know what I mean, right? Like in
Yeah.
those Western social constructs of what we were taught to value as health markers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I think everybody has autonomy and agency to do like whatever they want. If they want to lose weight, they have that, ability to do that. I take a weight inclusive perspective with nutrition. So, which essentially is like we use weight as like a one measurement for your health, but it's not the only measurement for your health. So I kind of ask for consent before even working with them that, hey, whatever nutrition changes we talk about are not going to be with the intention to shrink your body size or to meet some of these other goals that you maybe had in the past, but really kind of figuring out together, like brainstorming with with the individual, like what would health mean to you? Like if those things were just things, right? Like, they were just data points, right? Like what would health mean to you? We know there's so many different ways to define like our own individual health, I think, and that's going to look different for each person because we're so unique, kind of like a thumbprint, I think of it, right? It's like, do I want to work on my physical health condition? Do I want to take care of my mental health? It's all connected. So like I let them kind of set, like we kind of have like reflection and talk about that as like the starting point and like how would they measure progress in those areas.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the first sessions together. And then we focus on nutrition to support getting there. And that's going to look different for each person.
Yeah. Okay. Is it possible to accept my body while wanting to lose weight? What are some yeah, what do you think about that one? Is it possible to accept your body while also losing weight or working towards like a health and nutrition goal, right? Like what would somebody come to you with? Like, oh, I want to lose my baby weight, or I want to, I don't know, lose weight because I have this health issue and like my doctor said, right, I gotta lose weight
Mhm.
to deal with this health issue. Um, but like how do you help them also accept their body and not like loathe their body while in the process of trying to transform their,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay. So oftentimes when I hear this, like as a starting point, there's always something deeper for most folks, right? There's so much blame and criticism on our body, there for whatever reason the case might be. So when we explore a little bit deeper with folks, I think we can get to like the root of why they want the change. Sometimes it's like, I want to be more confident. I want to be more worthy. I want to be loved. I want to be accepted, right? So those are really deep issues that oftentimes manipulating your body size are not necessarily going to fix, right? So, and they can relate to that because these are like people who have chronically dieted throughout their lives. So every time they get to a certain goal number, the posts, the goalposts keep moving, right? Because it's not, the actual need is not met. And so what we kind of do in our sessions is we help to kind of get there and then be like, hey, this is a great way for you to work with somebody in mental health, right? To kind of work through those pieces and understand that changing your body or manipulating your body isn't necessarily going to fix that alone, right? It has to do some kind of internal spiritual work with whoever, you seek advice from. And that part I think is kind of like an aha moment for folks as they're like, oh, I never made that connection before, right? And then, for the health piece, right, we can see a lot of folks, or it's a different for each person, but weight is often like a really poor indicator of health for many alone in that measurement alone. So if folks are wanting to like improve blood sugar or they're wanting to improve blood pressure, I just explained to them that weight loss is not necessarily going to fix that alone, right? Like, I mean, we have more evidence to show like kind of how like dieting and restricting yourself is actually more harmful than it is supportive for health. And I have like diabetic patients who are really normal thin BMI, who have really high A1Cs. And then on the opposite end, I have people in larger bodies who have really normal A1Cs. So, it just kind of depends on a number of different things. Like genetics is a big component in our health, right? But lifestyle, like what's going on. So kind of helping them get to the root of like why they want that change. And
Mhm.
then working on like, okay, you can do the nutrition changes without having this like diet culture mentality, and like finding a way to be more accepting and more gracious and more like more gratitude for your body, right? Of all the things that you're able to do along with some of these nutrition changes to help manage like whatever the reason they're like wanting to change. That was a really long answer. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Yeah. So at the root of a lot of these things you're noticing are these bigger themes that I help people deal with, right? Yeah, I have these self-esteem issues or lack of confidence, or I don't feel like I'm enough, or
Yes.
I'm striving
Yeah.
to be more, or
Mhm.
yeah, feel more worthy, or
Mhm.
yeah. Oh, I feel that personally, and I feel that that resonates with so many of my clients too, you know. Do you talk openly about body acceptance with a lot of your patients or clients or whoever you work with? Or is that something that just kind of pops up here and there if they bring it up? Like, or is that a regular part of the work that you do?
I think it's like other healthcare providers, it's like a case by case basis. I see clients who just want support for like their health conditions. And then I also see clients who are needing support for healing with their eating disorders. So in that line, yes, it comes up pretty regularly because, as you know, a lot of it is intertwined with body, right? The eating disorder part of our brain. So that comes up pretty frequently. And then for some Kanaka who I meet with who are like, I just need help with my nutrition, but have also this really complex history of dieting, and wanting to change their kino, then that can come up in our work as well. Like, how can we find this acceptance or almost this neutral ground with our body so we can focus on nutrition and some of the things that are, supportive to your health without having that sort of critical, judgmental, like punishment part that sometimes comes along with the dieting, the history of dieting, right? So they think that's the only way to make like nutrition changes or lifestyle changes is it has to be some like no pain, no gain kind of mentality. And I'm like, oh, does it? Does it really?
I mean, I grew up like that, just being an athlete, I think, in our generation.
True.
That idea that you have to overextend yourself or push yourself beyond in order for the workout to be beneficial to you, or that you have to sacrifice with your diet and, be kind of extreme and kind of cut all these things
Mhm.
out, or go on these long stretches of being super strict with either calorie restrictions or um you know, what have you, bringing out certain food groups like carbohydrates or something.
Mhm.
And just like, I think back on it, knowing what I know now, I'm like, oh gosh, you know, not only the detriment that does to the body, but like mentally and emotionally, how that messes with you, right? How that
Yeah,
causes you to just be in this mindset that's not healthy.
for
Um,
sure.
yeah. Um, So when it comes to body acceptance, how do you feel like that is, how do you think body acceptance compares or is different to like body positivity, or I hear the terms now like body neutrality. Do you know any about that, or can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I'm just learning about all these different, like my understanding is that these are like social justice type movements. And so we can't acknowledge these movements without acknowledging like the Black, fat, queer women who started these movements. And I think body positivity originated like in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken, right? Um, but a lot of them have been co-opted by whiteness. So there's all, I think it's kind of evolving, and there's also like body liberation now too. And I think the premise behind this is my understanding is that it was just it was the fight for bodies to just exist as they were, however you identified, your orientation, your size, like all of that didn't matter, and that you could exist in a world as your authentic self without, needing to criticize or shape shift, to exist in a world that didn't accept you. So I've battled with like what to use in my practice. I think I've been leaning more towards like body liberation, which is kind of that the more recent idea of like that all bodies can exist in the world authentically. Um,
I love that.
because yeah, because right, like I think of Hawaii and liberation, and so I'm like that just makes sense to me. Because I think what the problem with body positivity is like thinner women are thinner, like white women are trying to say like look at me, I'm so fat, like it's okay, you can love your body, when you also have the opposite end of the spectrum where wahine are like, or femmes are like in these bodies naturally, and you're like, oh, so you're saying you don't want to be like me, right? That interpretation is so harmful and hurtful, but it's this not it's becoming like non-inclusive, I think was the point of that conversation. So where it originated to be more inclusive of all bodies, was my understanding. Um, so yeah, it's kind of evolved over time. I think it just depends on the client, what language is more supportive to them. Sometimes body neutrality is also like a term that I use too, is like, can we just exist with this kino without feeling like you have to go one way or the other, right? You might not love it and be happy all the time, but how can you move through the world in a way that is going to be caring and supportive to your body? And okay, yes, that's nutrition. Let's eat regular meals, right? Can we add some produce, right? So it kind of helps them simplify like the ways that they take care of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that. And I actually didn't know that body positivity had that history that only started not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me think of a lot of things that are relevant to what I do too. There's so much overlap between the work that we do, I feel like, um, in helping people to shift their mindset about a lot of things. I find that it can be really hard, um, especially in the Western world, like Western psychology. There's often what is called now like toxic positivity, where
Mm,
it's just, especially with social media, I feel like people oversimplify how easy it is to heal or to transform or to um, improve yourself. And that can
yes.
sometimes gaslight the many real systemic challenges that Kanaka or any marginalized people face. Um,
Mm,
so sometimes it's a matter of like if someone's dealing with kaumaha, depression in the Western world, or like anxiety, pihoihoi, it's sometimes about like, oh, let's not try to be super positive in our thinking. Let's just get you to a place where you're just like a little neutral in your thinking, right? You're not bashing yourself,
yeah.
being super critical, like just get you to a place where you're just observing things that are going on in your mind, in your life, neutrally, factually. Um,
Mm,
so, I'm sure people can apply that to their bodies too. Like I wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, instead of saying, I love my body, I love my rolls and my cellulite, like maybe I can just be like, you know,
here
my
we are.
my heart's beating today, right? Like I'm breathing, I'm
Yeah.
alive today. I don't have to love every dimple and right? But I can just be grateful I'm alive and it's functioning.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, no, I really resonate with what you said about like I think as I was a new provider and I wasn't aware of like so much about trauma and being trauma informed and um because it really being able to like validate every client's experience in the world, right? That some of these systemic issues are things outside of our control and they impact health and nutrition in so many different ways. So it wouldn't make sense for us to try to push past some of those feelings to make them do some of these changes, like you were saying. And so um that's been really like insightful for me to learn more about that and just how to better care for people. Be like, okay, this is a really important feeling. Can you go talk about this with your therapist, you know? And so what can you do, like as you said, like in this moment to like take care of yourself? Would that just be to make your breakfast, you know? Then that's where we can start, right? Like you don't have to, you know, push past any of the anxiety or whatever else you're feeling. But yeah, that's been so helpful for me. And I think helpful for clients too, because they don't always like recognize that connection, I think, with food and
Mhm.
self-care, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, I love that you reference like what you didn't know as an early provider, or I mean, there's so much that I'm still learning too. And I think you do a good job in your social media presence too, of just like being a human. I love that about you. That's what I'm trying to do a little bit more of also. I think we need more of that in the world, especially for our demographic, just
so too.
building the trust with other Kanaka. I feel like whenever there's been so much historical trauma that has taken place, that destigmatizing healthcare in general requires us to build trust that's based out of transparency. I mean, of course, it's not going to be 100%. We're not sharing our whole lives online, right? But being like, yeah, there's some stuff I don't know. I'm still learning, and
Mhm.
but I'm not gonna pretend like I know it, right?
Yeah.
And I think people really resonate with that message that you share things really authentically, and um, I think with the body liberation, just like you being the messenger of your message and the way that you do it, like you're just cooking in your house and just sharing about your life. I think it's just so good. I love everything you share.
Oh, thanks. I don't know what I'm doing sometimes, but
Going on a
that's
walk, I'm
part
like,
of the
yes, I need to go on a
I
walk.
know. I think that's part of the reason, like, I don't know, social media feels so weird. Like, I'm sure you can relate, but I don't think we ever thought, like, with our profession that we'd be showing up in that way on social media. And it feels so weird. But I think, like you said, to be able to reach, like, other people and this demographic, I think showing up like that is really important, even if it feels like really silly. What am I doing?
Yeah.
But you're right. Like Pilina is a part that I think we rush through as healthcare providers, and um, I know that's something that I did early on in my career because it's like, okay, you have X amount of visits covered with this client for insurance. Make sure you get everything in. So we always, what's time for building a relationship? Yeah. So I'm like, let's talk about food. And it's so personal and intimate and sometimes like related to trauma. And I'm like, wow, that was so violent of me. Like just, you didn't know, but
Well, we were taught
it's
that,
yeah, we
right?
were taught that way, right? That's true. That's so true. That was my training. It's like get it done, get the goals, get the information out. Okay, there's a better way to do this, but yeah.
So much we could say about the Western medical model and Western healthcare system.
So much, so much.
That's another episode.
That's
I
another
feel like going up
episode
another
on
soapbox.
the
So,
on your podcast.
oh my gosh, is this a podcast? I feel like
Is
we
this a
could.
podcast? Part two.
Yeah. Oh, okay. What else do we have here? I don't know. Let's see. Um, Okay, I'm curious because you do work with individuals dealing with eating disorders. Um, what I don't know, what can you speak to um in helping them with body image stuff when they're having like negative body image days that obviously impact their eating habits?
Mm.
Uh, I guess, are there any strategies or things that you teach them that could also be applicable to just like the general public, right? Like just anybody, little reminder
Mm.
that could help people accept their bodies better or
Yeah.
fully.
Yeah, it depends on the person. Sometimes it's like deeply like trauma related, so they have to kind of work through that on their with their therapist. But on the food end, I think because I work more like on the surface level, like more body acceptance, neutrality, right? Like how can we be, like you said, how can we be grateful to be here, to be existing and like, in its simplest way, like there's another day that we get to be here on this planet. And so I work with folks on like more gratitude, finding like small moments of gratitude with their bodies. It doesn't even have to be like really personal and intimate, but it could just be something as simple as like, can you find something that you're grateful for about your kino? Like in this moment, like what are you grateful for? And usually I just share an example, like I'm really grateful to be here and for my lungs working and breathing and being able to move oxygen to my muscles. And, I'm grateful to these arms, to be able to hug my keiki every day. Like they're still working, and I can cook food for them or think, something simple like that. And I think when we can return to the basics of the things that our kino can do and the way that we move through the world with this body, that's really healing and supportive. And then the other part, so it's really working on that mindset and how to make peace with your body or neutrality or whatever they want to do. And then the other piece of that is like, no matter how you're feeling about yourself or the way you feel in your body that day, it's like you still have to take care of yourself and feeding yourself, having a regular balanced meal and really honoring your hunger is one of the simplest ways you can show self-care for yourself. I think self-care has also been co-opted, right? In different spaces. So, but it was a act of liberation, right? To take care of ourselves um, because Indigenous people, we take on a lot of kuleana in the world. So it's a two-piece like conversation. It's like, okay, we can acknowledge the way we feel about our bodies and work towards improving that mindset while also like what are the physical things that we can do right now to feed ourselves, in a way that works for ourselves and our family.
That's something I work on with almost every client. I mean, just to relate back to you, right? Is every time we have a literal hunger cue, like, oh, my stomach's growling, I'm hungry, and we suppress that and we don't feed ourselves when we have accessibility to food, right? Because of
Mhm.
working or we're feeding the kids instead, or
Mhm.
got to do one more thing around the house. Subconsciously we're telling ourselves like, oh, we don't matter, like our needs
Yep.
are important, and that affects our self-worth. And so
Mhm.
we can really truly care for the basic needs, right?
Yeah.
Hydration, nutrition, breathing, like going to the bathroom when we need,
Going to the bathroom.
moms, right? It's like, oh,
Yes, so
like
bad.
forever. I mean, TMI,
Mhm.
I don't know, but just if we can really honor those things and not constantly put other people before us. I mean, as a mom, I think there's a huge shift. I don't know if you work with a lot of moms, I do, but there's like a shift that happens through motherhood, which I think in the beginning, a lot of moms feel like, oh, I have to do everything for my child and then put
Mhm.
myself last, which for a period of time, a lot, there is a time where they depend on you for everything. So you do have to make
Mhm.
sacrifices, right? And also like how can we remember we do need to take care of ourselves too. So like,
Yeah,
prioritize eating when we're actually hungry
actually hungry.
and we need it. And it's, sometimes it's really hard sometimes.
It's
Um,
super hard and it seems really silly. Like, but you're so right. Like, how many caregivers, moms, and moms are caregivers. I shouldn't even use that separately, but like, we just
right. But
ignore
moms
that.
aren't the only ones, right? Like you said, caregivers in general. These are like teachers who work for
Hmm.
hours and hours, like people who care
Nurses, yeah.
uh, anyone in healthcare, like there's so
Hmm.
many caregivers, right?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. Oh, I was going just it affects self-worth, and it can, if we neglect our self-care like nutrition for long periods of time consistently, it can lead to other things like now having, issues with self-worth, or not having boundaries in relationships, and then
Mm,
unhealthy relationships, or then experiencing some depression or some anxiety, right? So like
yeah, such a
eventually,
good point.
what role does intuitive eating play in accepting your body?
Yeah, this is a good question. And my approach has like evolved over time. So it used to be like really deeply intuitive eating. And then I realized that not everybody has access to that. And some people might struggle with some of those. So for those folks who don't know, like intuitive eating is like a 10-step evidence-based approach to a non-diet approach to nutrition. So it's working on like healing your relationship with food and learning how to create a more gentle approach to nutrition. And you work through like, letting go of food waste or, eating when you're hungry. But, not everybody has access to that, especially in Hawaii. Like food insecurity rates are really high. Um, Struggling with food waste is something that is really difficult for our people because cost is so expensive right now. So I've kind of stepped a little bit away from that and kind of adapted like my own approach to nutrition, which I think some of the principles are important. And so it's become like just how to teach folks how to like approach nutrition in like a more gentle way, um, and a more attuned way. So they're like really learning to listen to their kino and what are some of the cues that are happening in their body to communicate like when they need to eat or when they need certain things, but also like using like your practical knowledge of nutrition. And you're like, okay, I know that I have to be like, I think folks think that anti-diet approach is like to eat whatever you want, but it's like there can be like intention with what you eat. So like you can have a balanced meal. In fact, that's really encouraged, right? So what does that look like? You probably want to add your macronutrients in, some fiber. You want to add in some vitamins and minerals. So let's get some produce on there, right? So there's intentionality in there. And there's also like some just basic knowledge when it comes to nutrition. So I think teaching folks just a different approach to nutrition, that it doesn't have to be in the form of a diet, because I think that's what most folks associate nutrition with. They're like, oh, I have to change my eating. I have to go on a diet. I'm like, no, there's different ways that you can approach nutrition. And I think this is a more like loving, accepting way to feed your body because again, we're relying on like attunement, but also like your practical knowledge that you know of nutrition versus, maybe in the past you tried to like manipulate things in order to manipulate your body. That was a
Oh,
really long answer. But yeah.
no, I love that. Yeah, I can relate to that personally, and professionally I can see parallels in the work that I do. Just like I feel like the Western world has taught us to um like give our power away to other folks, to ask for other people to like tell us what to do with our lives, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
some people want a diet because they want someone to tell them like this is what to eat and not to eat. Or some people come to me and they actually want me to give them specific advice of like what to do or not to do with their relationship or with their
Mhm.
health. And so I would assume that like intuitive eating is more of that attuning, like you said, going inward and figuring out for yourself, like, okay, what is right for me? I have to
Mhm.
exploration and figure that out. But that can be really shocking and kind of overwhelming and difficult to somebody who's really disconnected from their body or hasn't been observing what's going on because maybe they're disassociated in some ways. Um, and so
So,
it's so interesting, yeah, to me to make that connection there.
yeah, I really wish I had more like training in psychology. Like, like we had just a introduction, but really like this part is like the crossover, yeah, like you were saying, in so many different ways. So I ended up getting like supervision from another dietitian who's in eating disorders just to get support with my cases because it's so much psychology and counseling and when to refer to who, because I'm only talking about food, but there's so much that, comes out, like you said, maybe they didn't know or had time to slow down and really think about that. And it's scary when it comes to the surface. I'm like, what
Yeah.
do we do next?
I know I can relate. Like, I wish I had more training in like the medical field. And I just talked about this on, I was talking story with I don't know if you know Lily Noikawa Hikawa. She works for Papa Ololokahi, but I was talking story with her for interview. And I was just talking about how it's so bizarre to me that like medical health and mental health is so segregated. Like, you know,
Mhm.
you're more of that Western, I mean, medical health field, right? But there should be, it's like one and the same. It's all connected, right? Like we
All
should
connected.
have knowledge in everything. Because even mental
Yeah.
health is like mental health, what is it? It's like our brain health, our gut health, our nervous system health. I should know all of these things. And I had to supplement my knowledge on that kind of stuff through like other trainings after grad school.
Hmm. Same,
Yeah.
same.
That
And
wasn't
still
taught.
supplementing
Right.
because it's like evolving and changing. Yeah, I feel that so deeply. Like, just I don't think people know like what we do as dietitians is we're really like alongside healthcare providers. So we have to know, like you said, these health conditions and then the way that food interacts with their health or medication, right? So we can really tailor for them. And that's so like the idea that one diet could just be good for every person just seems so ridiculous because everybody is so unique in what they need and their health and
Yeah.
goals. So that really needs to, then there's so much nuance, to nutrition. Yeah.
For those of us who are emotional eaters, like, and can sometimes, I would say, binge eat, right? Or like overeat, and then experience a lot of guilt afterwards or shame, and then have maybe body issues, body image issues after the fact, and feel like horrible for like eating one too many bowls of whatever it is, or um like I don't know what how would you kind of help somebody who has that pattern of that kind of behavior um
Mm-hmm.
to deal with that? Of course, why are they emotionally eating? I'm sure you would have to kind of figure that out, but are there any, I don't know, any like tips or tricks of how you would help somebody to work through that?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. So there is a diagnosis for binge eating disorder in the DSM-5, which So if somebody actually met criteria for that, then I think treatment would be like so much different than somebody who might be just experiencing like a case of overeating, like emotionally. But in my experience, most people who struggle with binge eating, there's like two different root reasons of like it's an emotional trigger or it's like a from a place of restriction. So really being able to kind of figure out and identify where the overeating is coming from or the binge is like what's triggering the binge can be really helpful for folks. So bringing awareness to their triggers and um, if it's an emotional reason, how can they take care of themselves? We don't deem it like we don't emotional eating isn't inherently bad, I think. I think there's a lot of reasons why we eat food, especially as Kanaka, right? We don't say let's go out for a walk after we get this promotion, right? Everything is emotional, right? So um how to support them through different types of emotions that could be maybe like one ways that like food and eating could be one way that they support their emotions, but maybe they want to put other tools in their toolkit, and what that might look like to help them ground will look different, I think, for each individual. And then on the other hand, for like the restriction, which some people also struggle with just for like regular overeating or like emotional eating, it's really fixing the chaotic eating patterns throughout the day. So the irregular meals, maybe just having coffee for breakfast, maybe skipping their lunch because they're like working through their paperwork or whatever the case might be. They will often blame like the actual meal when we have to go back and kind of look at their whole intake throughout the day. So really having like regular balanced meals can really be helpful for the emotional eating. And then also, I mean, you know this, like you can't manage emotions when you're like physically hungry. So if you're not getting enough nutrition, like your neurons aren't going to work properly to like, think. But then also, I can't tell you to go take a walk when you're starving. Like it's not going to work. So, you have to be able to like start eating more regularly throughout the day and like fix the nutrition first in that way, and then work on the emotional like management, I think, afterwards. And that could be with me or like their therapist or whoever they want to work with. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think zooming out, right? You said looking at that
Mhm.
picture of what's going on is a good practice, something that I help clients to do too, or patients. Because a lot of, naturally, Kanaka are like, oh, just looking at the symptom or just looking at what happened right before the symptom, but it's usually a story, right? All these
Yeah,
up to it. Yeah. It makes hangry is a real thing, right?
it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And it's usually like the upper end of the hunger scale. So telling folks, if you're eating that hangry, that's way too late.
Yeah.
There's
What
no way I can tell you to eat lettuce when you're hangry. Like, it's just not going to happen.
I think uh, what is his name? Kumu Kahanuola Solitario from Eho Pilimai. He came up with another term but in Olala Hawaii that is like hangry, but in Olala Hawaii. I forget what it was.
Oh, that's so funny.
I don't know.
Gotta find it.
Remember right now. But yeah. But also in like the mental health world or like especially the addictions space, they say HALT, HALT. It's an acronym for like if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, right? Like kind of those basic needs, you're at higher risk for giving into temptations or your addictive
Mm,
behaviors. So try not to get hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, right? Like feed yourself, try to manage your emotions
yeah.
in community and connection with other people socially and make sure you're getting enough rest, stuff like that. And so easier said than done when we're out here trying to survive life, but we gotta
Sure.
and do our best. Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, that makes so much sense. I got to remember that. That was a good acronym to remember. Yeah, because it's so true. Those are kind of the patterns I like listen for, when you're working with folks. Yeah. There's so much nuance to nutrition.
Um, Last question, just do you work with like what is your population that you work with?
So most of my clients are moms. So mostly wahine or identifying as wahine, and I think I have like maybe like a handful of kane that wanted to work together. So a handful of kane, and I would say about like a third of them are eating disorder clients.
Wow.
So it's not a big list. I have like maybe 30 right now because I also have some contract work that I do on the side. But I think the reason I bring that up is I think Hawaiians don't think that they could have eating disorders or that's not something that they might struggle with. And many of the folks that I have are things that they've figured out that they've had an eating disorder just from our conversation. So went to go get tested or they're like, oh, that makes sense why I've been struggling, with my body for so long, um, because we were, there's so much stigma attached to it or that it's, only certain people can have it, but that's not, we're learning that that's not the case. And many Black BIPOC folks, in general, just because of trauma and the things, social determinants of health that struggle with eating disorders as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So just
So
to understand, do you ever work with kids?
I take the youngest I'll go is like 18.
Mm.
I am I've been struggling with this because I have a classmate who's a pediatrician and she's like, I want to send my kids to you, but like working with parents is so challenging. I don't know. I used to work with parents and so um maybe check back with me in a couple of years if I do.
No, I can
But I
see.
might. It's hard. It's hard. I think we got to make like I
Right.
just think back to that program, that Ohana program where they just put everybody in there and we all learned together. Then that's like I feel like the safest way to teach Keiki about nutrition. It doesn't feel right for me to be giving therapy to a keiki who doesn't have a whole lot of control over their food in their house, right? Or the cooking and things like so that part is weird. I haven't figured out how to navigate that yet in like a inclusive way. If
Uh,
that makes sense.
Same. Like people want to send kids,
Yeah.
and I'm like, what? How much can I do if they're still gonna go home to the same family system that they're in? Like unless you work with the whole family, it's really kind of, I don't know.
Ah,
It's
I
not,
feel you.
you know,
Mm,
yeah,
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 that feels validating. Thank you.
it's hard. Yeah. You want to help everybody, but I was talking to this guy Ikaika, he does Lomi, and he's like, I cannot Lomi the world. And I was like, yeah, that really shifted things for me because I'm like a people pleaser, or recovering
Oh,
people.
same,
And I'm
same.
like, every time I'm like ready to overcommit myself to something, I just hear his voice in my head. I'm like, Anuhea, you cannot like therapize the whole world. Like you have to set boundaries for yourself. You cannot just say yes to all the things.
That's
So
a good one. That's a good one.
yeah.
I might have to adopt that.
Yeah.
I'm also a recovering people pleaser. Did we all grow up like that? I think that's like a
I
very
mean,
Hawaii thing.
wine culture. Yeah.
Brah, I tell you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, one day we'll figure it out.
Oh, well, mahalo for sharing all your manao with me.